Today I'm going to show you all my music production and mixing tips while making a Logic Pro X template and then giving it to you for free. I'll show you how I set up my project, how I produce my drums, how I mix my vocals, my favorite free plugins and VSTs, what buses I use, and everything in between. It's pretty much everything I've learned about music production over the last 20 years, which has brought me from Berlin to New York to producing tracks for Broadway stars, and now to you guys, making music production tutorials over on YouTube. Speaking of which, let's get into it. Here we go! Let's go to Logic Pro X at the top, preferences, recording project settings, audio, and then make sure our sample rate is 48K. You can also use 44.1, which is fine, but 48K is a slightly higher resolution, so why not? I like to change my BPM to 122, just so it's not on the original setting. Let's open our notes here, and then we'll write in our key, chords, BPM, and our instruments. And then if you're songwriting as well, then it's always good to have your structure. Writing out notes helps so much to get your brain around what you're going to do. Close that, and let's get onto the instruments. Pianos, probably the nicest instrument just to listen to and mess around. So the two pianos I'm using at the minute are both free. The first one I love is the Lab piano from Spitfire Audio, very gentle sounding piano. Then the other piano I like to use as well, XLN Audio Addictive Keys Stereo Demo, because the full thing's very expensive. Ooh, very nice. So imaging, stereo spread, stereo, and I'll leave that like that for the minute. Let's look at some bass sounds. There's some really nice real sounding basses like the Liverpool bass. To full velocity, it does a slide down, which is pretty useful. And then it's also nice to have a sub bass ready to go when you really need that thick, beefy, warm, low end. ES1, synthesizer 1, mono for our sub bass, synth bass, sub bass. Keep it between 100 and 20 because I tend to do that a lot. But of course, this will change as we go along in the mixing stage. Alright, so there's a sub bass and Liverpool bass ready to go. Next for drums, at the minute I'm making my drums through audio tracks. So Command D here, shift and click all of these, and then we go shift Command G, and then we have a group track or some group track. And this way I have them all coming together and I can put compression on all our drums as one entity. Lets them blend a little better together. Kick here, big and a small kick. Now I have snare A, snare B, now I have claps, now I have clicks, hi-hats, a syncopated hi-hat, and maybe a crash. Perks are percussion. Now these are all mono track perk over on the right, we can have a perk over on the left, the same clap doubled, one left, one right, and then you can double the same sound and have them wider, just bring some thickness. And the great thing is when we have them as a group track, then we can just EQ them and compress them all together. The Studio Effect is quite a nice sounding compressor. Next, let's open up some synths. I love the retro synth, it's so good. I love the sculpture synth, there's just some really cool sounds here, especially some of the Mallet instruments, some marimbas. Put more reverb on that, really nice. Retro synth, let's see, what will we leave this one on? Cheerful melody. Sounds a bit like a flute. I'll leave it on chill out pad for the minute. We'll add in a third synth as well, and let's use Alchemy just because it has such a wide spectrum of sounds. Wow, that's serious. And one last synth is really important to have strings. Let's go string Ensemble Pizzicato. Pizzicato is really nice. I'll leave it with string ensemble, like 2 strings ready to go, and let's jump onto some vocals. This is where things start to get real interesting. So we have a lead vox, double vox. So that's a double vocal, a low octave, a harmony left and right. And if you're able to sing high, maybe singing up an octave as well. Double these harmonies. So we've got 2 vocals right and 2 vocals left. And this is when we're in the chorus and we want our sound to be really thick. So we start putting vocals left and wide, hard panned. That just thickens up the whole mix. It sounds way better. Like we did with the drums, shift, click the whole group, shift Command G, and then we have a vocal sum group. And once again, it's great that we can blend all these sounds together and make them sound like one vocal. So for the mix and the whole thing, we'll usually put some compression. Sometimes I throw in multiband compression in as well, but I'll leave it out for the minute, just depends on what the situation calls for. Okay, so there's all our tracks ready to go. Now let's work on some buses. For these vocals, let me just throw on some of the plugins that we might use. So EQ, cut out below 100, that's fine. I'll go with 2 compressors then. Please edit these compressors when you get them. These are not ready to go. But the first compressor will be taking off loud transients. The second will be taking off just a gradual everything, just smoothing it out a little bit. Then I want another EQ, and sometimes I like to boost between 2 to 6K and above 8K. So 2 to 6K for presence, above 8K for breathiness, which is quite nice. But then it also adds to a lot of more sibilance. So we need a de-esser. So if we go to the de-esser, and then once again, it just totally depends what the vocal's calling for. And then I love to put saturation on vocals. And this will depend what plugins you have. We stick with the Logic stock plugins. Maybe a bit of overdrive could work. Just give it a bit more beef. But for the minute, I'll leave that for the buses. So let's make some buses then. So let's go bus 11 and bus 12. We're going to make our short and long reverb. With these reverbs, I don't want any sibilance. So I usually cut out above 4K, and I don't want much low end because it just muddies up the mix so quickly. For reverb, I'm nearly always using Little Plate, which is the Sound Toys plugin, but for today, because I'm using all Logic Pro X stock plugins, let's go with some Space Designer. With vocals, it's great to have a little bit of pre-delay. Maybe let's just go with 50 milliseconds. Reverb happens slightly after. It lets the vocal sit out in front. So we can go with a short reverb that's a second long, and then maybe a longer reverb that's maybe about 4 or so seconds. Now let's make some delay buses. We're going to do the same with the EQ, tape delay. Now, of course, it's nice to have a few different ones, but let's go with a quadrant note first. Copy across the EQ and the delay. I like 8-note dotted is very, very useful. One last delay, that's just a slap back delay that's really short. On bus 30, this is the one I like to use for my chorus effect, which is basically stereo panning and making it slightly detuned, which is really good for adding presence and making vocals or whatever instrument you want sit out front. So let's go modulation, chorus, and stereo. And we'll need an EQ as well, because once again, I don't like my low end being stereo pan too much, and we got to watch out for those sibilants as well. Or you can go for the Abbey Road trick where we're just cutting it out altogether, which is also useful. Next, let's go for some pitches. Let's go for a 20 pitch shifter. And we'll have one that will go down an octave. And because that's down an octave, we need to make sure we have a little bit of low frequencies, maybe take a low mids, no high end. And then we'll do the same for up an octave, bus 21. And go to that pitch shifter and bring it up an octave. And then we name those. Super. Distortion or overdrive bus if we automate the sub bass to growl a little bit more. Or in your vocals, also handy to have. Let's go for bus 25. Just a tiny bit of EQ. Get rid of the highs, get rid of some lows, maybe the tone up, and maybe the output down a little bit. Bus 25 for distortion and bus 25 for overdrive. Let's fine tune some of these buses by recording in sounds and editing them. So let's go to that lead vocal. Ba-da-ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-ba-da-da-da. Long reverb. Ba-da-ba-da-da-da. We're a bit flat. Have an auto tune ready to go. Bring the response down to 0. You used to call me on your cell phone. You used to call me on your cell phone. For any of those auto-tune sounds you want. Let's open up our mixer and go to our instruments, and we'll put a little bit of the reverb on each track. Bit of short verb, bit of long verb. They all have the same reverb. They'll sound like they're sitting in the same room. And then the lead vocal will need a lot of these ready to go, especially the chorus to give it presence. Let it sit out front. Maybe a bit of overdrive, just give it a bit of boost if we need it. Delays are always great on lead vocal, depending on what delays we need. So many options. As we layer more vocals, there becomes a build-up of low mid frequencies, which can muddy the mix. Take down a little bit of EQ there, the more vocals we have. We should have enough mid frequencies from the lead vocal anyway, and the low double and the double. I'm gonna make one last bus, a reverb sidechain bus. Same plugins as the long reverb, but it's also gonna be sidechain compressed to the lead vocal. Sidechain, audio, lead vocal. When the vocal stops, the reverb explodes. Let me show you. You used to call me on my cell phone. You used to call me on my cell phone. Cool, so you can really hear there where the reverb explodes after the vocal stops. And we can mess around with that to make it less significant. You used to call me on my cell phone, lay down when you need my love. As you can see with a lot of this, it totally depends on the situation and what it calls for and what you want it to sound like as well. Hopefully this template helps, and you can download this template as well. Okay, so let me know if you'd like to see me make another template with all my proper plugins that I use all the time. I thought it was important to use all the stock plugins this time around, just so everybody can use all of these sounds that we're using. And thank you to Sandra and Tanya for suggesting this video. So if you guys have any other ideas, let me know down below.